Hey guys, welcome to the Solo Soulscast. My name is Shane, I'm your host, and this is episode 8. Hopefully everyone enjoyed last week's episode, which was an episode all about, well, my wife was on it with me, and I had her talk about her experience with Dark Souls and Solo Souls series, kind of like an outsider's perspective, because she hates the games, basically. So I thought it'd be interesting to have her on. And it was a lot of fun. We laughed a lot. We were drinking a little bit. Neither one of us was drunk or anything like that, but it was a lot of fun. It was a loose episode, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. I'd like to have her on again at some point. Hopefully, also at some point we can get a better microphone configuration because we were using my one microphone that plugs into the computer, and then it's just a little microphone part at the end. I don't know how to describe it, and it just like clips onto a piece of clothing. So I had it clipped onto my collar, and she was sitting like real close to me so she could be heard. But I think it came out great. It sounded good. She sounded good. Some of her audio was a little low, but it wasn't that bad. I've heard worse. I've heard worse on podcasts that are way more popular than this, so I'm not going to complain. So again, welcome everybody. This is episode 8. 8 episodes. That's awesome. We're just rolling right along. What are we talking about today? I'm not telling you yet. You need to wait a little bit. All right. I need to prime you guys up. If you are here, you're here because you love the Souls games: Dark Souls, Demon Souls, Bloodborne, all of them. And if you found me, that's great. I'm assuming you found me on YouTube, perhaps from Instagram that I linked to YouTube, or I don't know, maybe you just searched Dark Souls, hashtag Dark Souls on YouTube, and you went through 85,000 videos, and then you found this one. I don't like the way this is starting. This is way too rambly. So let's just exhale, take a deep breath, and let's get into it. As I've said, my name is Shane. You guys know that. This is the Solo Soulscast. It's the offshoot of the regular Soulscast. My name's Shane. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, obviously. My name on YouTube is Shane Norton. Search that. It's a picture of a beer. My profile is a picture of a beer. Not very creative. Just deal with it. My Twitter handle, which I found myself not using Twitter too much lately. It's Calamete. That's K-A-1-A-M-E-E-T. And I'm kind of going in a backwards order because I usually start with Instagram and go to YouTube, but let's switch it up. And my Instagram account, again, which I don't use as much as I used to, it's Calamete, K-A-L-A-M-E-E-T. And today is actually St. Patrick's Day. It's a Thursday. Recording this late. It will most likely be released on Friday, which would be the 18th of March. But I'm recording this on St. Patrick's Day. And I'm going to have a couple drinks, because that's what you do on St. Patrick's Day, I guess. I don't really know what St. Patrick's Day is, and maybe that makes me ignorant. Wouldn't be the first time. So I'm going to have a couple drinks. I'm certainly not going to get drunk. I find that's basically impossible to get drunk anymore. Yeah, let's get a tiny bit of a buzz going. Except I am going to eat Hungry Man chicken and waffles pretty soon, so any kind of buzz I have will be destroyed by that. I swear I'm not buzzed yet, but this is like the most rambly intro ever. Alright, I like to talk about what I've been playing. You guys know that. I've been playing a few games. Last week, I forgot to mention, I started playing a game called Illusion of Gaia for the Super Nintendo. It is my favorite Super Nintendo game, and I'd put it in the top probably 5 favorite games of all time. I like it better than Link to the Past for Super Nintendo, at least. I like it better than all the Mario games for Super Nintendo. I like it better than every other Super Nintendo game I've played. So I started playing that last week. I've uploaded some boss battles to YouTube. I think I've uploaded 3 boss battles. I'm still playing through Dark Souls. I actually just played it a couple nights ago for the first time in like 10 days. And I am still really having a hard time. I'm very rusty. I'm not sure why, because since the last time I've played Dark Souls, I've played through Bloodborne, like 2.5 times. I've played through Dark Souls 2 at least once with all the DLCs. So I know those games aren't perfect comparisons. The mechanics are a little bit different. It plays a little different, but I'm surprised at how much I'm struggling with Dark Souls. It took me like 5 tries to beat the Moonlight Butterfly. I might have been a little underleveled, but even so. And finally, I'm playing a little game called The Binding of Isaac Rebirth. And that is like a... Binding of Isaac was a game that came out, and then this Rebirth edition has like a bunch of extra stuff. I've always been aware of the games, but I've never really known what they were all about. But I've been wanting to play it for a while, so with I think a Christmas gift card, I bought it from the PlayStation Network. Might have been like $15. I finally started playing it maybe last week, and I am obsessed. I actually don't know the last time I was so obsessed with a game. Probably Bloodborne. And this might sound like heresy to say on this podcast, but I might even be a little more obsessed with this game than I was with Bloodborne. At least it's on par. It's hard to explain. Look up screenshots, look up videos. What you could do is go to my YouTube and look up the first set of bosses I posted. This game has an insane amount of bosses. It's probably close to 50 or 60. So I'm recording all those. I'm putting several bosses into one video because each boss is only about 30 seconds long. So I didn't feel like flooding YouTube with 60 30-second videos. That would be kind of silly. But they're there. I'm going to play it for at least a little bit after I finish this podcast here. But that's it. That's what I've been playing. Now that I've made you hang on for 7.5 minutes, what am I talking about? I'm talking about the Dark Souls Bestiary. Listeners of the regular Soulscast might sound familiar. Adam and I did the Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2 Bestiary, which essentially we just talk about the enemies in the Souls games, for each specific game. So this is the Dark Souls edition of that. And I was going to do a Dark Souls 3 episode because I was convinced that Dark Souls 3 came out on March 24th, which is next week. That's the Japanese release. We're getting it in North America, April 12th. So once I realized that Dark Souls 3 was not coming out next week, I had to scramble and figure out something else to talk about. So I just kind of picked this one at random because I have a list of topics I want to do. And this was one of them, and I thought, it won't be too hard, and I can probably slap an episode together, even though I spent way longer on these notes than I ever expected to. Story of my life. But yeah, we're going to talk about the Dark Souls enemies. Things like favorite enemies, favorite designs, most annoying enemies, stuff like that. I'm even using the template that Adam and I use for our normal Soulscast. So, before we jump in, as I said, it's St. Patrick's Day. I'm going to, you might have heard that cap unscrew, I'm going to take a shot live, take a shot of alcohol, because that's what you do on St. Patrick's Day when you're an adult. This is just normal Jim Beam bourbon. I'm going to put it into a, did you get that pour? Into a red Solo cup. Sorry, not a Solo cup, a mini red Solo cup, plastic. So this is class all the way. But happy belated St. Patrick's Day, I guess, everybody, and bottoms up. Oh, God. I've never been a big drinker. I love the idea of it. And being drunk, is fun as long as you don't get a hangover. But, which I might have actually mentioned last week, I didn't start drinking until I was 21. And that's the honest to God's truth. I never touched alcohol until maybe 2 weeks before my 21st birthday. And compared to a lot of people I know who started drinking when they were 14, I didn't do it. So, I've never been a huge drinker, a huge partier. Ugh. And taking straight shots of whiskey makes you feel like a man, I guess. Okay, let's jump into it since we're 35 minutes into the podcast already. I was hoping to keep this at about 30, but I'm already 10 minutes in, which is ridiculous. I want to talk about the most annoying enemies, and I have 3 here that I'm going to talk about. The first one is the Undead Assassin, and they can be found in the Lower Undead Burg. the run up to the Capra Demon. You go down a flight of stairs, there's like fire, you fight a couple of dogs, and then there's these undead assassins. And by the way, I'm getting all the names from the Dark Souls wiki, darksouls.wiki.fextralife.com. Their enemies page. That's where I'm getting the names. I don't know if these are the official names. I'm guessing they probably are, but I'll explain what they are anyway, just in case you don't know from the name. The undead assassin are like black cloaked assassin kind of figures. They have like small, maybe daggers. They're very fast. They're agile. They can do, they can dodge. They can parry and riposte, which not many enemies in Dark Souls can do. They can do back attacks, which again, or back stabs, which again, not many enemies in Dark Souls can do. I don't think, at least. You're not usually in a position to get backstabbed by many enemies. But these guys, they're not hard, because you can kill them in a few hits, but I find them very annoying because in this area of the game, I think it's the only area they're in, they come in two trios of three is what I was going to say. So you find 3 of them that you have to kill, and then a little ways ahead you find 3 more, and they gang up on you. And fighting 3 at a time is pretty tough, because again, they can parry you. Even if you're just attacking, they can parry. If you're fighting one and turn around to run, the moment you turn around, you're open for a backstab. And they're just a pain in the ass. And I always, I find them a hassle, and I always find myself running away to like split them up and kind of kill them one by one. And I want to try to talk about strategies I can use to beat these annoying enemies, and that's kind of what I do. And then I just beat them silly, because again, I can hit them, and the character I'm doing now, in like 3 hits I think I can kill them. I'm mostly strength. I want to kind of balance it between strength and dexterity, but I'm mostly strength, and I'm right now two-handing a bastard sword. And when I fought Capra Demon, it was a bastard sword +1, I think. So I killed him in like 3 hits. So those are the first guys. I hate them. I've always hated them. There are enemies similar to that in Demon Souls that I also hate. Next enemy that I find very annoying, and I like to differentiate between annoying and difficult. Annoying enemies can be difficult, and I guess difficult enemies can be annoying, but I'm picking these enemies more on just, I hate fighting them. They are pains in the asses, and they don't have to be hard. Again, the undead assassins can be killed in 3 hits. If you gang up on them early, you can kill them real fast. So these are annoying enemies. The skeleton beast, which you would know as like the giant skeletons in the Tomb of the Giants that walk around on all 4s. They're like skeleton dogs. The regular skeletons in the game and the big giant skeletons I don't have a problem with. They're not too hard as long as you can dodge around them, which you can. You can kill them pretty easily. Even in the very dark Tomb of the Giants, you can kill them pretty easily. The skeleton beasts, on the other hand, always give me problems. They're very fast. They can like lunge at you, and it's unexpected because 1 second they're in one position, and the next they start lunging, and it's very hard to dodge that because they just go so fast, and they can kill you very quickly as well. And my strategy is usually just to avoid them completely. I try to run around them if I can, although they follow you, so that doesn't work that great. Otherwise, I can try to. They have an attack where they like, I think they get up on their like hind legs and kind of fall forward, and then they're like prone on the floor for a few seconds, and I usually try to get a couple attacks in then. And that's how I do it. I either just run away or wait for that attack and then attack them like there. So that's them, and if you've played through Dark Souls and you've got to the Tomb of the Giants, you guys know that. Those are not fun enemies. And the final ones... Oh, I have 4 actually. Sorry, I have 4 I'm going to talk about. So the next ones, speaking of skeletons, the wheel skeletons. They are... Maybe they're the worst enemies in the game in terms of how just irritating they are, because they can kill you very fast. They're not... And that's the thing, they're not hard to kill, but the fact that they can gang up on you and kill you in like 2 seconds flat just is very aggravating. When you're jumping down in the catacombs, you get to this, once you've gone through the whole catacombs, there's like this bottom area right before you fight Pinwheel, that stupid boss, and there's this big open area where there's like 4 or 5 Pinwheel enemies. Or sorry, not Pinwheel enemies, wheel skeletons. And they like track you, and if they hit you, if you don't get out of the way immediately, they kill you in like 3 or 4 hits, because they're skeletons that are like attached to these big wheels with spikes. So they just roll on the ground, and they roll at you, and each spike hits you, and each spike takes away like a quarter of your health basically, and they roll fast, so you're screwed. And again, they're not hard. You can kill them in like 2 hits, but if you don't dodge very quickly, you're screwed. And if you dodge, even if you dodge one, if there's another one that's in its line of sight, I guess it can kill you, and it's just it's no good. I don't think any enemy makes my blood boil more than that. Okay, final annoying enemy I'm going to talk about is the Bounding Demon of Izalith. And these are those big 2-legged shitheads that you find in Lost Izalith and all the lava. I feel like I just talked about these enemies very recently, maybe a couple episodes ago. The Lost Izalith area, it's all orange, like glowing orange lava. And these enemies are so big, you see like their 2 legs that come from like the top of the TV screen down, and they jump, they can stomp on you, they are very hard to kill. I almost never kill them, I just run right past them. They're very powerful, and they can notice you from very far away. I guess there was a patch that nerfed their ability to sense you from so far away, so it's probably not as bad now. Again, I haven't played that part in a while. But they're hard to kill anyway, and they inflict real good damage. And that area, there's like between 4 and 6 of them, and they're all like clustered together. So if you alert one, you basically alert all of them, and they're jumping around and trying to stomp on you. The only good thing is they can actually hurt each other. But I've only successfully killed probably like 2 or 3 of them, because I never bother. I always just run to the like the room areas that they can't hit you, even though they can still kind of clip through the wall and hit you, which is BS, but whatever. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the enemy designs. Best enemy designs. On the whole, I think Dark Souls has a lot of great enemies. I remember when Adam and I talked about Dark Souls 2, we kind of came to the conclusion that the enemies, for the most part, were pretty lame. A lot of knights, a lot of undead soldiers, not a lot of monsters. Dark Souls has a lot of monsters. And my favorite enemy designs, and again, this is strictly just enemy designs, not my favorite enemies, not my favorite, I don't know. It's not based on anything but how they look. The ones I'm going to talk about they're pretty bizarre. They're pretty out there. And a few of them, well, actually all 3 of them, they only exist in basically one part of the game. So it's not like, oh, my favorite enemy is the undead hollow soldier. I guess undead hollow is a little bit of an oxymoron. But, I gotta stay focused here. I swear I'm not that drunk. I might be like a tiny bit buzzed. Yeah, famous last words from any person that's ever had alcohol, right? Okay, best enemy designs. Let's just get right through it. The Great Feline. In the Darkroot Garden, you come to an area, it's like a big forest, and then kind of to the right of an area, there's another area. Don't you love that description? And there's this big cat-like enemy. And his appearance is so unexpected and so bizarre that I was like shocked when I saw him. In promo pictures, he was one of the enemies that they showed a lot of, and I still was very surprised to see him, because you're in this big forest, and all of a sudden this giant cat jumps down, and he's pretty tough, but he's really cool looking. He's a cat, but he's not just a cat. It's like a cat mixed with something, and I'm not sure. But it's a simple design, but I really like that about it. It's simplistic, but it has a nice creepiness factor to it, because it's like in that way that normal sized things, when they get, when they grow 10 times their size, they kind of get creepy. It's like that. But again, just the unexpected nature of it, I think is great. And I really like that enemy. Even though I find it kind of difficult to fight, and I usually just cheese him, which is kind of lame. But, whatever. I'm not on trial here, guys. I'm just talking about the great feline. Man, I feel like this is going to be the worst episode yet. And this is probably going to be the episode with the most views because I mentioned St. Patrick's Day and drinking and being drunk, and everyone's just going to listen to it, thinking I'm like hammered out of my mind or something. I'm not. I'm just rambling more than I usually do. I'm a rambly kind of guy anyway, and then add a little bit of liquor to that, and forget about it. Okay, I'm like losing my breath because I'm talking so much. Next enemy that I really like the design of, the Chaos Eater, which if I just say that, unless you really, really know Dark Souls, you have no idea what I'm talking about. And I didn't know the name of this enemy until 2 nights ago when I looked it up in the wiki. Chaos Eater, in the in Lost Izalith, after the lava section, you get to like a section where it's very like old roots and vines. It's right before the Bed of Chaos battle. It's this big yellow cone-like creature. It has like tentacles, like I think 2 tentacles coming out of the front, and it has a bunch of eyes all around it, and it has like a big mouth on the top. There's only maybe like 2 of them in the whole game, but they're so weird. They're like weirder than almost any enemy in the whole game. And again, it's just another bizarre enemy that's only found in one location that you're like, what the hell is going on here? It's very alien looking. Alien before Bloodborne, because Bloodborne has a lot of alien stuff. Like, in fact, this enemy I think would fit perfectly in Bloodborne without even, a second mention. So I really like this guy. And again, if you're not sure what he looks like, Google him, Chaos Eater. And he just eats all the chaos, just eating chaos, chilling. He has a bunch of eyes. He sees the chaos, then he eats the chaos, as you would typically do. Final enemy that I like, that I'm going to talk about, enemy design I'm going to talk about, the mushroom people. There's 2 varieties. There's little ones, and there's big bulky ones. And you find them in a few places. They mostly reside in the Darkroot Garden, and like in the forest area, I believe near the Great Feline, as a matter of fact. You can also find them in the Great Hollow and Ash Lake. But they're just walking anthropomorphic mushrooms. They look exactly like mushrooms, but they have a face, and they have arms and legs, I believe. I mean, again, it's been a long time. They just walk. They don't attack you unless you attack them. They're very passive in that way. But they're so weird. If you guys haven't noticed, I like weird things. And these are probably one of the weirdest enemies in the game. I know the Chaos Eater that I just talked about is weird because he's a big, like, weird alien. And then the Great Feline is a big, weird cat. But these are just mushrooms that walk around. And if you fight one, they're very difficult. The big ones, they throw ridiculous haymakers. So, like, Mike Tyson split up. Like, you take Mike Tyson's body and his ability to box, and you split him up into hundreds of different mushrooms that can walk and have facial features. And that's what it's like. That makes no goddamn sense. But I think they're great. The very first time I saw them, I remember like being amazed and astounded at these enemies. And I was like, this is a special game because they have they're just walking Mike Tyson mushrooms that can kill you in like 2 hits. They're so powerful. Why are these mushrooms so powerful? They're one of the hardest hitting enemies in the game, and they're just fucking mushrooms. Think about a mushroom. How easy you can just rip it in half. Nope, not these guys. They will beat the ever-living shit out of you. Those are some of the enemy designs I like. There's more that I like. The mimics, I really like those a lot. The treasure chests that have the teeth and the arms, I like those a lot. I like the Black Knights. They're simple, but they're very ominous, and they have this evil air about them. I like them a lot. I like the even though they're recycled bosses, the gargoyles you find in Anor Londo, they're pretty cool. I like them. And yeah, I obviously stayed away from bosses as I'm just talking about normal enemies. Bosses will be a different podcast. I almost did bosses this week, but we'll save that for a little bit later when I'm really stuck, because bosses, I could talk for days, since that's what my entire YouTube channel is dedicated to. And when I was writing my blog, that was one of the main focuses of the blog, was to talk about the boss battles and all the games that I covered. So I realized right now, 27 minutes in, that at the very top I wanted to have a general discussion about the enemies. So I totally blew that, but that's fine. Maybe having the general discussion about the enemies at the end is a better place for it. So before I get into that, I'm going to quickly say, for the normal Soulscast, the Bloodborne and Dark Souls 2 Bestiary episodes, Adam and I talked about which enemies best linked into the lore of the game. And I was trying to do that with this, and I couldn't. I'm not entrenched in the lore enough. I don't remember the lore from the game. I'd have to do so much extra reading and research that I just decided to skip it for now. That's one thing about this podcast, maybe the only downfall. I very rarely talk about lore. I will have lore episodes, and I will talk about lore. I need to do, those are going to be the most heavily researched episodes, because it's so vague and ambiguous, and I don't know enough about it. I haven't sat down to learn it enough. I used to know about it, and then I just forgot because it's been so long. So I'm not going to talk about lore enemies in this game. And I'm not going to talk about lore enemies in this podcast. That will be for another day. So I'm going to end it by just generally talking about the enemies. I think this game has great enemies. As I mentioned before, Dark Souls 2 enemies, not that great for the most part. I think of the 4 games, they have the worst enemies. Dark Souls has some great enemies. Now, don't get me wrong, they have their share of knights and undead soldiers and hollow soldiers and like the typical stuff. And they have rats, which are boring. What else? That might be the only like kind of normal, like cliched enemy. There's not a lot of cliches in this game. Although I will say, I don't like how they reuse the Taurus Demon and Capra Demon as enemies later on. In general, I hate games that take bosses that you fought and just throw them later as regular enemies. That kind of stuff bothers me. Because besides those two, the Taurus Demon and Capra Demon, which you find after you kill the big giant guy, and Ceaseless Discharge, once you kill him, you can go to the like frozen lava part, and there's Taurus Demons and Capra Demons there. I think it's the Demon Ruins, but besides that, there's a Moonlight Butterfly in the Crystal Caves, which I guess makes sense because apparently Seath, the Scalers, created the Moonlight Butterflies. There's a tiny bit of lore for you, so it makes sense that the Moonlight Butterfly would be in his caves. Even so, I just hate when bosses are used as enemies. And Pinwheel, that crappy boss to begin with, is used as an enemy right before the fight with Nito, in that area with all the skeleton babies. Oh, and as I also mentioned, the Bell Gargoyles are reused as lightning enemies. They're lightning-based enemies in Anor Londo. So that's something I don't like. Maybe that's it. I don't know. I feel like there might even be like another boss that's a regular enemy later on. But I love the enemies in this game. Besides the ones I've talked about, there's the Hydras, which I really like. There's the Crystal Golems I like. Most of the enemies in the Darkroot base and the Darkroot Garden, I like them. There's the tree guys, there's the big stone soldiers. There's those really weird lizards with the long necks where there's like only 1 or 2 of them. Then there's all those weird enemies in the demon ruins, like the ones with the eggs on them. You know, there's still a lot of guards and soldiers, like I said, like in the painting guardians, and the enemies in the DLC were kind of disappointing because a lot of them were just like soldiers or like townspeople or the big stone guys. They're basically recycled from the Darkroot Basin or Darkroot Garden. I don't remember which. You know, there's like the dogs and the rats and stuff like that. But even so, there's a lot of really cool, unique enemies that you don't see in other games and you don't see in other Souls games. There's the undead dragons, which are great, and those drakes, which are like the small dragons that only exist in the Valley of the Drakes. There's the parasitic wall hugger, which is the one, like that weird enemy that's in Blighttown that you only see him there. There's just a very nice variety, and you see every area has different enemies. You might see a couple areas with repeating enemies, but for the most part, every area has some pretty unique enemies. But this is a game where I can say that I love the enemies. If I think of some games I've played in the last couple of years, and this isn't a knock necessarily because this is a much older game, but I played Final Fantasy IV for the first time on my Game Boy Advance last year. I wrote about it on my blog. I had like diary entries and everything. I loved it. It was an amazing game, and I'm sad that I haven't played it until just last year. But I played Final Fantasy IV, and that has some great bosses and has some great enemies. But as you get further along in the game, you start to see that they just take old enemies and just do a palette swap and a name change, and then you'll see one enemy from like the first dungeon repeated in 1 or 2 or 3 more dungeons throughout the game, with just, you know, the different color and a different name. Dark Souls isn't a game that does that. They don't take old enemies and just throw a can of paint on them and call them new enemies. And I appreciate that. As I'm looking at the wiki of their enemies, it's a pretty big list. And I know that they took time in creating the enemies, and if you looked hard enough, I'm sure every single enemy can tie into the lore of its area in some way. Dark Souls is a game, especially Dark Souls, but the whole series, but Dark Souls is a game where things are not placed at random. If an enemy is in a certain area, it's there for a reason. Like, if you're in one area and you see an enemy from a different area and you think, well, that's really weird. Like the Moonlight Butterfly, perfect example. In the Crystal Caves, I think they're called, right before you fight Seath with all the invisible walkways, you will see a Moonlight Butterfly. I guess it's called a Crystal Butterfly. And just according to the wiki, it says mass-produced version of the boss Moonlight Butterfly. So at first you think, why would this boss be an enemy in this totally random place? Well, if Seath the Scaleless is creating all these enemies, then it makes a huge amount of sense that this enemy would be in his cave right before his boss battle. So that kind of stuff. I really like how every enemy is not just randomly placed, because it does seem like some games will just take enemies and throw them anywhere just to add enemies. Everything is so strategically placed in this game that you just have to admire it. I can't imagine how much work these games are to make, and how much thought goes into where every single thing, and not even enemies, where every single item, where every single, even dead body, even like dead bodies you find throughout the game are placed there for specific reasons. And I think it's great. Other games don't do that. So I think that's about all I can ramble on for tonight. I apologize if this episode sucks hugely. Coming off of my episode I did with my wife last week, which was a lot of fun. This episode was fun too. It's just fun in a different way. But if anyone doesn't like it, I'm not sorry. If you don't like it, then tough cookies, man. I'm trying to have some fun here. I realized after last week's episode, I'd like to have a little more fun. I get very serious when I talk about the Souls games, and I'm usually, like I said last week, I'm usually a very fun, unserious person. I take very few things seriously in life. Souls is one of them. So I'm, when I'm recording this, I'm like focused. I'm serious. I don't laugh too much. I don't make too many jokes. But in a typical day, I'm always laughing. I'm always making jokes. I'm always saying ridiculous, stupid things. So last week, that came through pretty well. Talking with my wife, because my wife and I, Sandra, she and I are very good at going back and forth, and we're very comfortable with each other, obviously, because we're married. So when it's just me, I don't have anyone to like bounce off jokes or silly things to say. I'm just looking at my screen, just talking into my little microphone. So I realized last week it was fun to be a little more loose. I want to be a little looser for my actual solo episodes. So I'm hoping this one was a little sillier. It probably was. It was also probably way more rambly, as I've said probably 9 times already. So I've talked about what I wanted to talk about. I talked about Dark Souls enemies, my favorite designs, the most annoying enemies, in general how I feel about them, which if you want a very, very quick recap, I love them, and I hate that they reuse bosses as enemies. If you have 2 takeaways from this, I love the enemies, and I hate bosses that are reused as enemies. And Binding of Isaac Rebirth is fucking amazing. And I'm going to play it in the next 2 minutes. I can't even help myself. It's ridiculous. So to cap off this episode, I'm going to pour myself one more shot of this delicious Jim Beam bourbon. I'm going to try to pour it right next to the microphone so you guys can hear it. This is for St. Patrick's Day, and just because. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, episode 8. Look for episode 9 next week. Hopefully it's not going to be on a Friday. I haven't, even though this is the 8th episode, I have not gotten into a good schedule yet. I would love to have these released on like Tuesday or Wednesday at the latest, but it's still been Thursday or Friday. We'll work on that. I don't know what I'm doing next week, but just stay tuned. Check my Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, all that garbage. So I'm going to pour myself a shot. Everyone out there, if you're listening to it, it's Friday, and if it's Friday night, pour yourself a shot. Unless you work Saturday morning like I do, then don't pour yourself a shot. But just listen to this beautifulness right next to the microphone. Hopefully I don't pour this all over myself. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you cats next week. God, how do people do it so often? Ugh. Thanks, guys.